Welcome back. Now, I'm absolutely delighted that Arlene Foster, the First Minister of Northern Ireland, is joining me. Arlene, thanks so much for being with us tonight. Now, I want to start with the world's favourite subject. I'm being slightly sarcastic there, which is Brexit. You really should have done a deal with Theresa May over Brexit, shouldn't you? Because, you know, Boris Johnson has forced on you effectively a border in the Irish Sea.
Well, good evening, Robert. It's good to be with you from Belfast. Well, that's really akin to saying, would you like a broken arm or a broken leg? Because both deals, of course, were bad for Northern Ireland, and we're now having to deal with the issues around Boris's deal and Boris's withdrawal agreement. And, of course, those are very clear issues, and the Northern Ireland Assembly sent a very clear message around that earlier this week.
But surely, in the end, if you've got to choose between broken bones, the Theresa May, breakage was less damaging to you and Northern Ireland, in your view, than Boris Johnson's.
No, I don't think so, because, of course, it would have left us in perpetuity in the European Union Customs Union, at least under Boris's deal. We're in the UK Customs Union, albeit there are issues in relation to having to have checks coming from Great Britain into Northern Ireland. Now, I listened very carefully to what the Prime Minister had to say in the House of Commons in response to one of my colleagues today, where he said emphatically, I think was the phrase he used, that there wouldn't be any checks. So we look forward to hearing from him how he's going to deal with that in the coming days.
Well, I mean, just on that, Stefan de Rink, a European Commission spokesman, has said tonight in London that he is absolutely certain there will have to be those checks in the Irish Sea. So why on earth do you believe the Prime Minister?
Well, it's not a case of believing the Prime Minister. He has said it on the record in the House of Commons. We will meet with Michael Gove and indeed with ministers from Scotland and Wales next week in the Joint Ministerial Council meeting in Cardiff around this very issue. And we'll be listening very carefully to what the government has to say to us as to how they are going to deal with unfettered access between Northern Ireland and Great Britain, but also, importantly, from Great Britain into Northern Ireland.
What do you feel about this? Actually, as I understand it, completely unprecedented situation where every national parliament, not the UK Parliament, but obviously the Scottish, Welsh, Northern Ireland Assemblies have all voted against Boris Johnson's deal, but it will be pushed through and it will have a profound impact on all of your nations.
Well, I think it's important to recognise that perhaps we're voting against it for different reasons. Even in the Northern Ireland Assembly, those of us who want to see Brexit happening are voting for different reasons from those who don't want to see Brexit happening. So it's important to recognise that. But from our perspective, we want to make sure that we leave the European Union. We joined it together, so we need to leave it together as one nation. And we have serious concerns, as you know, Robert, around the withdrawal agreement and what it means for intertrade in between the different parts of the United Kingdom. And that's very important for us because, of course, most of our goods are sold into the Great Britain market. I think it's around 70% of all goods that are made in Northern Ireland circulate within the United Kingdom market. And then about 2/3 of our goods that we sell in Northern Ireland come over from Great Britain into Northern Ireland. So as you can see, we're completely integral and it would be absolutely wrong and would cause consumers, the prices would go up. We may have less consumer choice. So those are issues that are very critical to us in Northern Ireland and we need to get answers to them.
Now, your Legislative Assembly is up and running again, but I do just want to have one final question on this sort of general issue of DUP decision-making in the UK Parliament, and it is that as a result of your decision-making, you ended up with a general election where you lost a couple of MPs. You lost any influence over the Tory government because Boris Johnson got more or less a landslide. This was a disaster for the DUP. Have you had to consider your own position as leader of the DUP?
Well, it wasn't a disaster for the DUP, and in fact, if you look at the actual share of the vote, it was our second best result in the history of the DUP in relation to the number of votes that we received.
But you lost a couple of MPs.
We lost two very critical MPs, and we're very sorry that that has happened. But, you know, democracy is there. We have to respect democracy, and we have to get on with it. And we have as much influence now as we did before the Confidence and Supply Agreement. In other words, we will have to work very hard with our colleagues and build alliances right across the House of Commons. And I was very pleased to have a good meeting with Tony Lloyd earlier this week, the Shadow Secretary of State for Northern Ireland.
Now, on the Assembly being up and running again, you've got a few tricky issues. Perhaps the trickiest is the whole abortion issue, where Westminster voted to decriminalise abortion. One of your new MPs says that the new framework, however, for how the new approach to abortion should be implemented should be scrapped. Do you agree with that?
Well, I believe that the abortion legislation was imposed upon Northern Ireland going against the devolution settlement. Actually, it should have been very much left to the Northern Ireland Assembly to deal with these issues. It was imposed upon us. So now what we need to do is that the Assembly is back and running. Therefore, we need to have our voice heard in relation to all of these issues, because it will be a very different voice to what has been imposed upon us from Westminster.
So are you saying that you will try now and seize control of the whole issue of how abortion is operated in Northern Ireland?
Well, I think there's unanimity across the chamber in regard to the fact that currently we have a position where abortions are available up to 27 weeks, which is totally unacceptable right across the piece. There will be some argument about where that should come back to, but I think everybody in Northern Ireland recognises that that is not a sustainable position and we need to deal with that.
Now, there's also this very contentious issue of the position of army veterans. David Davis has been arguing that on the basis of the Stormont House Agreement, he worries there will be a disproportionate number of former British Army officers prosecuted. Do you share those fears?
Well, I think it's been 5 years since the Stormont House Agreement, and the government put out a consultation on this issue some time ago. They need to look at that consultation very closely, and I think when they look at that consultation, they will see that there's a great deal of concern about elements of the Stormont House Agreement, and I think it's incumbent upon the Secretary of State for Northern Ireland to engage with all of those victims groups that have sent in concerns, and indeed we have raised concerns ourselves about the Stormont House Agreement. As I say, 5 years ago, a lot of things have changed, and we need to get back into a situation where we put the victims at the centre of anything we do in relation to legacy issues.
And finally, on same-sex marriage, do you recognise or do you accept that you've lost the argument?
Well, as you know, same-sex marriage has, again, like abortion, been imposed upon Northern Ireland. What we need to ensure now are the same, if you like, safeguards for those people who don't want to engage in those issues from a church point of view are given to Northern Ireland as have been given in the rest of the United Kingdom. The Secretary of State says that is the case, and we will very much hope that that is the case.
First Minister, wonderful that you joined us tonight. Thank you
Thank you
so much.